Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhakti Nashtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 29, talks between Narad and King Prachin Barhe. Text number 73 onwards. Arthe hi avidyamane api samsritirna nivartate dhyayato vishyanasya swapne anartha gamo yatha. When the living entity dreams, the sense objects are not actually present. However, because one is associated with the sense objects, they become manifest. Similarly, the living entity, when with undeveloped senses, does not cease to exist materially, even though he may not be exactly in contact with the sense objects. It is sometimes said that because a child is innocent, he is completely pure. Actually, this is not the fact. Wow. The effects of fruitive activities reserved in the subtle body appear in three concurrent stages. One is called bija, the root, another is called kutastha, the desire, and the other is called phalonmukha, about to fructify. The manifest stage is called prarabdha, already in action. In a conscious or unconscious state, the actions of the subtle or gross bodies may not be manifest, but such states cannot be called the liberated state. A child may be innocent, but this does not mean that he is a liberated soul. Everything is held in reservation and everything will become manifest in due course of time. Even in the absence of certain manifestations in the subtle body, the objects of sense enjoyment may act. The example has been given of a nocturnal emission in which the physical senses act even when the physical objects are not manifest. The three modes of material nature may not be manifest in the subtle body, but the contamination of the three modes remains conserved, and in due course of time it becomes manifest. Even if the reactions of the subtle and gross bodies are not manifest, one does not become free from the material conditions. Therefore, it is wrong to say that a child is as good as a liberated soul. So, child is innocent because his bodies or his senses has not developed yet. But as soon as his senses develop, then he develops those desires. And the desires are in the seed form, they are there because the soul with the subtle body is traveling from so many births. So just because the child hasn't performed any activity yet doesn't mean he's pure. He just has a chance to perform any of those activities. So very, very important for us to understand. So that's why in India they say, "Oh, bachche to Bhagwan ka roop hote hain," which is fine because they haven't done anything in this lifetime yet. But previous lifetimes, we don't know the whole story. But that is why sometimes devotees also talk about we need to have childlike faith or attitude. But the childlike, what we generally mean is pure. That is pure. But that purity is only in the actions. We don't know about the bija. But for a devotee, even the bija, the seed form has to also go away. So that is even more pure stage. Evam panchavidham lingam trivrit shodashas vistritam esha chaitanya yukto jiv iti abhidhiyate. The five sense objects, the five sense organs, the five knowledge acquiring senses, and the mind are the 16 material expansions. These combine with the living entity and are influenced by the three modes of material nature. Thus, the existence of the conditioned soul is understood. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which includes the mind. Here it is also explained that the living entity comes in contact with the 16 material elements and is influenced by the three modes of material nature. The living entity and this combination of elements combine to form what is called Jiva Bhuta, the conditioned soul that struggles hard within the material nature. The total material existence is first agitated by the three modes of material nature, and these become the living conditions of the living entity. The total material existence is first agitated by the three modes of material nature, and these become the living conditions of the living entity. Thus, the subtle and gross bodies develop, and the ingredients are earth, water, fire, air, sky, and so on. According to Srila Madhvacharya, when consciousness, the living force in the heart, is agitated by the three modes of material nature, then the subtle body of the living entity, consisting of the mind, the sense objects, the five senses that acquire knowledge, and the five senses for acting in the material condition, becomes possible. So, as we have studied in the chapters where all the creation was described, all the Mahatattva and Pradhan, and everything was there in the unmanifest stage, and the time element comes in, and everything starts getting developed one by one. So this is what Madhvacharya is saying, that because of the living force in the heart, when it is agitated, then everything starts. Because without the living force, nothing can happen. Anen purusho dehan upadatte vimunchati harsham shokam bhayam dukkham sukham chanen vindati. By virtue of the processes of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. This is known as a transmigration of the soul. Thus, the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. According to this explanation, one can clearly understand that originally the living entity was as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in its pure spiritual existence. However, when the mind becomes polluted by the desires for sense gratification in the material world, the living entity drops into the material conditions, as explained in this verse. Thus, he begins his material existence, which means that he transmigrates, from one body to another and becomes more and more entangled in material existence. The process of Krishna consciousness, by which one always thinks of Krishna, is a transcendental process by which one can revert to his original spiritual existence. Devotional service means always thinking of Krishna. Krishna says, always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you were my very dear friend. One should always engage in the Lord's devotional service as recommended in the Archana Mark. One should worship the deity in the temple and constantly offer obeisances to the spiritual master and the deity. These processes are recommended to one who actually wants to become free from material entanglement. Modern psychologists can study the actions of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing, but they are unable to go deep into the matter. This is due to their lack of knowledge and to their not being associated with liberated Acharya. So previously, Prabhupada is explaining now that originally the living entity is pure, but when we fall down in the material world, we take up all these material conditions, material body, material conditioning. And why this happens? Because the mind becomes polluted by desires for sense gratification. And that's when our material existence starts. We transmigrate from one body to another and become more and more entangled in material existence. So now by the process of devotional service, we're trying to cut off all those entanglements, all those desires are trying to be spiritualized. So slowly, all those entanglements will be removed, and the pure soul, which is bound within this conditioning, or material web of desires, it will shine forth slowly. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. So the self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. Unless all human society understands this important word, civilization will advance in ignorance, not in knowledge. So ignorance means taking birth again and again and again and again. Why not get out of it? Text 76 and 77. Yatha trina jalukeyam napyatyapyapayati cha nyata jain mriyamanu prag deha bhimatim jana yavadanyam na vindeta vyavadhanen karmanam mana eva manushendra bhutanam bhavabhavanam. The caterpillar transports itself from one leaf to another by capturing one leaf before giving up the other. Similarly, according to his previous work, the living entity must capture another body before giving up the one he has. This is because the mind is a reservoir of all kinds of desires. A living entity too much absorbed in material activity becomes very much attracted to the material body. Even at the point of death, he thinks of his present body and the relatives connected to it. Thus, he remains fully absorbed in the bodily conception of life, so much so that even at the point of death, he abhors or he hates leaving his present body. Sometimes it is found that a person on the verge of death remains in a coma for many days before giving up the body. This is common among so-called leaders and politicians who think that without their presence, the entire country and all society will be in chaos. This is called Maya. Political leaders do not like to leave their political posts, and they either have to be shot by an enemy or obliged to leave by the arrival of death. By superior arrangement, a living entity is offered another body, but because of his attraction to the present body, he does not like to transfer himself to another body. Thus, he is forced to accept another body by the laws of nature. So the next body, actually, in the shloka it said, caterpillar, he hangs on to the next leaf before giving up the first leaf. So similarly, the next body is created when we are still in this body because of that consciousness being developed. But we are so stubborn, we don't want to leave this body, and that is when Prabhupada says they go in coma. Means now you prepare. Now you cannot forcefully resist leaving this body, so prepare for the next body. And by force, you will be transferred. Material nature is very strong, and the material modes force one to accept another body. This force is visible when the living entity transmigrates from a superior body to an inferior one. One who acts like a dog or hog in the present body will certainly be forced to accept the body of a dog or hog in the next life. A person may be enjoying the body of a prime minister or a president, but when he understands that he will be forced to accept the body of a dog or hog, he chooses not to leave the present body. Therefore, he lies in a coma many days before death. This has been experienced by many politicians at the time of death. The conclusion is that the next body is already determined by superior control. The living entity immediately gives up the present body and enters another. Sometimes in the present body, the living entity feels that many of his desires and imaginations are not fulfilled. Those who are overly attracted to their life situation are forced to remain in a ghostly body and are not allowed to accept another gross body. Even in the body of a ghost, they create disturbance for neighbors and relatives. The mind is a prime cause of such a situation. According to one's mind, different types of bodies are generated and one is forced to accept them. So this is all very technical, but this is what happens when we don't want to leave the body, but we have to leave the body, and sometimes the next body is not ready. And those who are overly attached to their life situations are forced to remain in a ghostly body and not allowed to accept another gross body. So many things can go on. Those who understand this truth, they're ready to leave this body because this is going to happen. That is why in English there's a statement that says, as sure as death. Nothing is more sure than death. We all are going to die. What are we going to do before death? That will make sure what we'll get after death. But death is definitely going to happen. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, the state will attain without fail. Within one's body and mind, one can think of either a dog or a god, and the next life is offered to him accordingly. This is explained in Bhagavad Gita. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus, he meets with good and evil among various species. The living entity may transmigrate to either a superior or inferior body according to his association with the modes of material nature. If he associates with the mode of ignorance, he gets the body of an animal or an inferior man. But if he associates with the mode of goodness or passion, he gets a body accordingly. So those who are situated in the mode of goodness gradually go upward to the higher planets. Those in the mode of passion live on the earthly planets, and those in the mode of ignorance go down to the hellish worlds. The root cause of one's association is the mind. This is where the whole thing happens. This great Krishna consciousness movement is the greatest boon to human society because it is teaching everyone to think always of Krishna by executing devotion service. In this way, at the end of life, one may be transferred to the association of Krishna. This is technically called Nitya Leela Pravishta. That's why for devotees like Prabhupada, when we chant his name, we always say Jayam Nitya Leela Pravishta Vishnupat Paramhans Parivrajkacharya. So Nitya Leela Pravish means they have reached the perfection and they have entered the Nitya Leelas of Krishna. After understanding Krishna as he is, one can become eligible to enter Krishna Lok and associate with him. The mind is a cause of such an exalted position. The mind can also get one a body like those of dogs or hogs. To absorb the mind always in Krishna consciousness is therefore the greatest perfection of human life. And that is one of the reasons in Vaishnava tradition, we don't recommend having any pets in the house. Because, first of all, we don't have time. and or the energy, because there's so much of time required to serve the deities or do our sadhana or other preaching activities. And then the pets. Generally, what happens, people get attached to their pets. So much so that here in America we see, and in India also now this is happening. The dogs, if you have as a pet, he sleeps on the same bed with the owner. And then what are we going to think of the whole time? That pet. Then definitely we'll get the body of that dog. Next life. Just like Bharat Maharaj, he got attached to that baby deer, so attached. And although he was at the stage of Bhav Bhakti, but he fell down from that stage. Fell down in the sense that he got the body of a deer next life. Because he was a great exalted soul, so even in the body of deer, he would go and associate with the sadhus. That was a different story. But still, one lifetime he had to stay in the body of that deer. So that is risky, very risky. Text 78. Yadaksha charitan dhyayan karmani achi anu te asakrit sati karmani vidyayam bandha karmani atmanahu. As long as we desire to enjoy sense gratification, we create material activities. When the living entity acts in the material world, he enjoys the senses. And while enjoying the senses, he creates another series of material activities. In this way, the living entity becomes entrapped as a conditioned soul. So while in the subtle body, we create many plans to enjoy sense gratification. These plans are recorded in the spool of one's mind as bija, the root of fruitive activities. In conditional life, the living entity creates a series of bodies, one after another, and this is called karma bandhan. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, if we act only for the satisfaction of Vishnu, there is no bondage due to material activity. But if we act otherwise, we become entrapped by one material activity after another. Under these circumstances, it is to be supposed that by thinking, feeling, willing, we are creating a series of future material bodies. In the words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Anadi karma phale padi bhavarana vajale. The living entity falls into the ocean of karma bandhan as a result of past material activities. Instead of plunging oneself into the ocean of material activity, one should accept material activity only to maintain body and soul together. The rest of one's time should be devoted to engaging in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. In this way, one can attain relief from the reactions of material activity. So that is the only way to attain relief. Otherwise, karma bandhan is always there. It's gonna entangle us more and more in this material world. Atastad pavadartham bhaj sarvatmana harim pashyans tadatmakam vishwam sthiti utpatti apyayat yataha. You should always know that this cosmic manifestation is created, maintained, and annihilated by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consequently, everything within this cosmic manifestation is under the control of the Lord. To be enlightened by this perfect knowledge, one should always engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. So self-realization, understanding oneself as Brahman or spirit soul is very difficult in the material condition. However, if we accept the devotional service of the Lord will gradually reveal himself. In this way, the progressive devotee will gradually realize his spiritual position. We cannot see anything in the darkness of night, not even our own selves. But when there is sunshine, we can not only see the sun, but everything within the world as well. Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. Now here, O son of Pritha, How? By practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. When we engage ourselves in the devotional service of the Lord to become Krishna conscious, we understand not only Krishna, but everything related to Krishna. In other words, through Krishna consciousness, we can understand not only Krishna and the cosmic manifestation, but also our constitutional position. In Krishna consciousness, we can understand that the entire material creation is created by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, maintained by Him, annihilated by Him, and absorbed in Him. We are also part and parcel of the Lord. Everything is under the control of the Lord, and therefore our only duty is to surrender unto the Supreme and engage in His transcendental loving service. So this is what Narad Muni is telling King Prachin Barisha, that you forget about all those ritualistic activities you're doing, the sinful activities you're doing, and the mind will be absorbed in whatever sacrifices you have performed and whatever other activities that you have done. And this will just create another material body. That's it. Rather, engage yourself in devotional service and become spiritually advanced and go back home, back to Godhead. That is the purpose of life. So we'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments?
Krishna, thank you, Prabhuji.
प्रभु जी बैकग्राउंड कौन सी जगह है प्रभु जी?
Background मेरे को पता नहीं चला. It's not Kusum Sarovar. I would like to think it is Kusum, but it's not Kusum Sarovar. So not sure. Not sure. Maybe it's Apsara Kund near Punchari Kalota. I don't know.
Prabhuji, I was thinking of Menka Gandhi, who is the Minister of Animal and Environment and all. So she must be always thinking of animals and what will happen to her. She's totally against of, these street dogs, इनको उठाना नहीं है, इनको injections नहीं देने and so I was just thinking as she must be always making plans for the animals and how to save them and
what to speak of all the scientists who are doing so much of research work on all these viruses and bacteria. What will happen to them? But anyway, that could be their duty, but at the same time, if they engage in devotion service, that will help.
But duty may be constantly, they must be thinking about all these things. Huh?
Yeah. But anyway, we have to worry about ourselves first.
Yes, absolutely right.
Chalo, I guess we can stop here. You all have a wonderful and safe day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Jai Shila Prabhu.